Hey there, welcome to our channel. Let's continue with our episode. In the previous episode, we have seen how we can introduce auth service for our application. So as an auth service, we have created one service that is called user service, right? So user service is responsible for registering our user and authentication of the user, right? And assigning some kind of authorization as well as. So we have not added the authorization part because as of now, we are not interested in rules, right? So if you're looking at the authorization stuff, then definitely you can assign some kind of rule right here while you are going to generate the token. So the token, right, inside the token, then user can have all the rules. As an example, a rule can be buyer, seller, or maybe admin, right, maybe sales, etc. So today in this episode, we're going to handle our request validations from our other microservices. As you can see here in the user microservice, we have added this validate route, right? So where it's a kind of get call and where we're receiving the header request, right? The authorization, and we're trying to verify that the header token, if that the request is valid request from on behalf of user, based on the verification process, right? So we're sending some kind of response. As an example, it may be 400 or 403 or something like that, right? And while we're sending the request, while we are serving this request, right, then we're assigning the user data as well as. So here in this diagram, you can see while our order service is receiving a request from our user, then order service is forwarding that request to our auth service, right? And auth service is verifying that request header and try to figure out which user it is, right? What kind of rule it has, and those data it is giving back to the order service. So where order service can continue from there, right? So to perform a cart or create an order, make payment or whatever, right? And if the order service is finding out that the user is not valid, right? Some kind of error is coming back from the auth service, then order service is instantly throwing some kind of error message to the user. So user cannot proceed further from the order service anymore. So right now, these things we are doing directly by calling internally from microservice to microservice. But the later stage, we are going to move all these calls to the API gateway. So there are going to be a lot of fun. All right. So let's jump into the source code. And so as of now, in the source code, you can see we can call the validate. In our previous episode, we have checked our validation stuff by calling this validate route, right? So right now, I'm gonna close this one and let's go to our order service, right? So here in this order service, let's go to our routes here. And first of all, let's take care of the cart routes, because while we are creating our cart, we are passing some kind of like the hard-coded value, right? So where our user ID, we are accepting from our front end, right? Or maybe from Postman. So that is not the correct stuff, right? So user service data, like all the user related data, we should have to accept it from our headers itself, right? So that thing we are going to cover right here. So here in the cart routes, let's try to do a little bit modification. So first of all, this auth middleware, it doesn't make sense here, right? So let's try to get rid of this one. And because authorization and the authentication part is not a kind of part of our order service anymore. So that is what we need to do. We need to hand over to our auth service, right? So auth service refer to our user service. So what we can do, let's go to our util and let's go to inside the broker. And you can see we have one file that is called api.ts, right? So here inside this api.ts file, you can see already we have one call that is for get product details, right? So where we are calling the other microservices. The similar way, what we can do, we're going to introduce one more API call. This is going to be like const auth service base URL. And this URL will be going to come from our environment process.environment auth service base URL, or otherwise we can say simply this is not 9002, this is going to be 9000, right? Then we'll be introduced one more function that is going to reach out to our auth service, right? And it'll try to validate our request there, right? So let's try to do that quickly. All right, so now you can see we have added one more function that is called validate user, right? So when this validate user is going to call, then we need to pass the token right here. So that token we're assigning into our request header, and we're calling our auth service. That is going to be the base URL come from here, right? And as soon as we are receiving the response, we are making it sure, like, if the response status is not 200, right, then we should return unauthorized error from here, right? And if there are no any error, as an example, the status code is 200, then we're going to return the data. So here's the thing, like, while we are returning the data, we need to make sure what kind of data we are going to return. So in this case, we need to create one user model. That is, we need to add to our DTO, right? So here, inside the order service, inside the DTO, let's try to create one model, right? New, and I'm gonna keep the file name and new. This is going to be our user dot model dot ts, right? So here inside this user model, let's try to create one interface. So these are the properties are needed for user, right? All right, so these are the data we need to have in our user model. But one more thing we need to add it here. So if we go to the API here, right, api.ts file, you can see while we are calling this validate user, the function, then it is getting called the auth service, and it's trying to validate our request. As a response, whatever we're gaining here, that response will be contain our user data. As an example, we can say response as, right? So here, as user, right? That is, we have created right now inside this DTO user model, right? This one, right? And as soon as we are receiving this user data, somehow we need to attach all this data, all this user information to our request. How we can do that? So in this case, as you can see right now, we are using Express. So Express has a property declaration where we can inject the property in our interface, right, in the namespace. So that is what we need to do. Let's go to our user model. So let's declare this namespace stuff right here. Declare global, right? Declare global, and inside this global, we can say namespace express. If the namespace is express, then definitely inside this interface, like request interface, we are going to inject one data that is called one property that is called user, and this is going to be like optional, right? It can be present, it cannot be, maybe, right? That's why we're just marking it as optional. So now this part is done, right? So now what we can do, let's close it out, this one, and API also, we are perfectly able to handle this stuff. Like we're going to call this request, right? And it will going to call our auth service. We're passing this token as a header token as well as, right? So here you can directly assign this one as well as default header common, or otherwise you can directly assign like this as well, right? But the way it's gonna work, right? Other way around, you can say. Now only we are interested in status code 200. That's why we're returning this one here. And now let's go to our card routes, right? So here inside this route, we have already created one file that is called middleware, right? So if you have not created a file, just to create a file, simple file, it's called middleware.ts, right? So here inside this middleware.ts, what we can do, let's grab this piece of code from here, right? And we are going to add it to here, right? Let's try to import all of this stuff, like next function, and we can say request and response, not request from Express, and response also from Express, right? Now let's try to remove all this stuff from here, right? First of all, let's try to rename this auth middleware to request authorizer, right? Request authorizer. And inside here we can say const data will be await validate user. So that validate user we have already imported from our util, right? And here what we are going to do, this request will be having the headers, right? That headers we need to just like pass it on, and we are casting as string, right? And now if the data is present right here, definitely it'll give the data back as a kind of user, right? That is what we did. We have assigned while we are returning the data, we are casting as user right here. And inside here middleware, we're simply assigning this request, because now you can see we can we can assign the data to user, right? Why it is happening? Because if you go to this user model right here, you can see inside this express namespace, right? So we have already added one property that is called user. User is a type of user, right? And so request user will be our data, right? And maybe you can rename as kind of like user response or something, maybe user data. That is going to be more meaningful. Perfect. Now, if everything goes well, then we are going to call next, right? That means if the valid user, if we are receiving the valid user, then we are going to call next. Otherwise, what we need to do, we need to wrap it up with the try catch, right? So try catch. So try catch, and we're going to move this block of code to the try block, and inside this catch, what we can do, we're going to simply return the response. Return rest data will be for O3, right? And unauthorized error, right? And before that, one more check we can do, like if the request authorization header is present or not, because you can see like if we are not providing this request authorization, and again we are just to try to call this microservice, then definitely we can save this network call by simply adding one check. So that check, you can say if request header authorization is not present, then simply return from here for O3 unauthorized or unauthorized due to authorization token missing, right? This is the way we can just like throw it back from here. So we are saving the one network call rather than going to the validate user, and there we are going to call the auth service. Then auth service will find it out. Hey, you don't have the authorization token right there. So how can I validate? Then again, it will give it back, right? So we're checking it out right here beforehand to going to the auth microservice or user microservice. Right? Perfect. So now we are in a good place. We are in the right place. Or maybe what we can do, this error is not in use, right? So let's not to use the unauthorized here. Let's try to use just like error, something like this. Okay. So now this request authorizer is cool. So let's try to export it. All right. So now our request authorizer is ready to use, right? So let's go to our card routes. So here we can add the request authorizer right before calling any routes, like whatever routes are going to be needed or authorization attention. Those routes we can edit all this request authorizer beforehand as a kind of middleware. Here in the card routes, let's try to add this request authorizer so it can validate our request easily for all of the operations related to our user. As an example, while we're going to create the card, definitely the user information is going to be needed, right? So in this case, let's try to use the request authorizer here. Request authorizer, and this is already imported from our middleware, right? Perfect. So now here inside this request, while we are going to serve our or while we are going to create our card, then definitely you can directly access the user. You can see like request, right? Request.user. User, you can see we can have our user right there, right? So in the similar way, the get card also we can utilize. Let's try to add the request authorizer here. Request authorizer, right? And similar applies right here as well as request authorizer, right? And here as well as request authorizer. Cool. So all of the routes are protected right now, right? So let's cover one by one all of the card routes. We're going to visit once more, like instead of the hard-coded user input, right? If you can see here, we have the customer ID, that is we need to get rid, right? So because that is we should not supposed to accept from our postman. So this ID should not supposed to come from here, right? So then what we are going to do, but our request authorizer are going to assign that request for us by fetching out all of the required user information. All right, so now let's go one by one all these routes, right? So first we're going to handle the create card, then maybe get, update, delete, etc. But not with the hard-coded user, all right? So what we can do right now, we have our request authorizer that is going to play the role to grab the authenticated user from our auth service. So right now, here we can simply grab the authenticated user from our request the way we can say const user will be our request.user, right? So now we have our authorized user here, and we will check it out. Like if our user is not authorized or user is not so here we are going to check it out if the user doesn't exist here, right? So let's say not user is false. At any point of time, if user is not assigned correctly, definitely it will going to be undefined or something else, right? You can see either it can have user or it can be undefined. So that is what we need to check here. If the user doesn't exist at all, right, or undefined, then we can say next, right? Because here we are not going to handle the errors. We are simply going to pass to our maybe next request, right? And here what we can say, we'll be going to say next new error, right? Error user not found, right? And simply we are going to say return here, right? So it will not going to execute from further, right? And now the next thing, once we have the error, then once we have the user, that's gonna work. Then we are validating our request input here. And again, let's go to our user card request input. Now you can see we have our card request input, that is the customer ID. That is, we can fairly remove it, right? Because that's not required at all, right? So let's try to remove these things from here, right? Now let's go to our, again, card route, right? So right now the card input is purely like our product ID and quantity. That's cool. And we are evaluating the error. That is also good. Then what we can do, this card request input, you can see like create card. If you go to create card, then customer ID doesn't exist at all right now, right? Because we have removed these things from our hard-coded the card request input, right? So instead of that, what we are going to do, we're going to grab our authorized user, that is already we have captured right here, this one, and we are going to somehow we will be passing to our create card request, right, in the service. So let's try to do that. Let's go to our create card request here. And here inside the create card request, you can see we have our card request input, but we can extend it, right? We can add some additional value as well as. So how we can add those values, just like and we can say customer ID will be number, right? So this is the way we can, our input can have all these parameters like product ID, quantity, and customer ID as well as, right? Cool. Now let's go back to our card routes, but here's the problem. You cannot directly cast this request body as a kind of the card request input, right? So we need to tweak this card request input in a little bit different way. So what we can do, let's try to construct one input. Const input. Input will be our request body as a card input, or maybe we can directly say, you can say card request input will be request body, right? So this is the correct way rather than cast it, right? And because we are not forcing the request body to become the card request input. If we are going to cast it as the instead of like using this one, the card request input here, if we are going to cast it as this one, then we are forcing the requester to become this input become to be card request input. But if we are going to declare this way, then if it is compatible, then only we are receiving the input. Otherwise, it will going to give error. So this is safest way. Cool. Now we have our input, right? Then what we can do inside here, create card. Let's try to remove this part, and we're going to provide one kind of object, right? And that object can have, like you can say, this object can have whatever input we have, all this input plus customer ID. We are going to send the customer ID because create card input has the customer ID in additional field. That is also we are sending it out as a kind of object. So now you can see our create card is complying correctly, right? Perfect. Now let's go to our create card, and here we will check it out. Like here we need to change a little bit logic, because right now the existing flow, if we are going to create the card, then definitely we need to create the card first, and second time if you are going to add the same product ID, then it needs to update the quantity, right? So at least you can, like every time you no need to edit the card, right? So if you are going to add the card, let's say you are going to add one iPhone, add it, then it's going to add for the first time. Then second time again, if you're going to add the same iPhone, let's say you're going to you have visited a different page and you have seen, oh, this is the same iPhone, let's try to add more one. And then if you're going to hit one more, then it has to update the quantity. That is the logic we are going to handle in our backend, right? Let's try to do it together. We're going to review everything, right? So let's try to remove all this codes from here, and we can say like get product details from product catalog, right? Catalog service. Then this is what we are going to do, right? From getting the product details from there, right? Now, secondly, we are checking it out, like if the product stock has the quantity of input quantity, that is perfectly fine. Then here, for create the card, what we need to do, first of all, we need to find it out, because right now we are only just creating the card. So every time you are going to add the same product, also it's going to create new card item, right? So that is what we don't want. What we want, we will say find if the product is already exists in the card, right? Already in the card, right? Then what we can do, we can find out that line items and we can edit that line item. So that is what we are going to do, right? So let's try to do that. Const, then we can say a line item will be await repo dot find card by product ID, right? So definitely this function doesn't exist maybe. So what we need to do, we need to add a couple of more functions that is going to handle us to find out the product ID from our card by using the customer ID and product ID, right? So what we can do, we will check like if line item is exist, right? Then we're gonna say return repo dot update card, and in this case we are going to provide the line item ID, right? So whatever the line items ID, we are going to get it from our find card by product ID, and that line item quantity plus input quantity. So that means the existing quantity, let's say we have 10, then we are providing 2 more, then it has to become 12, right? So that is what we are going to do, right? Now, if everything goes well, then we're going to return, like if the card is exists right here, then we are going to tweak this one and update the card and return from here. Otherwise, we're going to create a new card item, new card line items. That is what we're gonna do. So right now, let's try to handle this find card by a product ID. That is, we need to handle it, right? So let's go to our repository. So repository type, and you can see here, we don't have that function, right? So let's try to create one, right? So we can say find card by product ID, and it says the customer ID is a number, product ID is a number, and promise we are just returning our card line items. So let's try to implement this method somewhere. All right, so now let's try to add this function here. So at least our card repository type can be comply, right? So now here const find card by product ID, and after that async, here we need to provide all these parameters in terms of like what you can say customer ID number, and product ID will be number. Then finally we need to return the promise as well as promise, and here card line items, right? Only one line items we are returning here. So here what we are going to do, we are going to say const, right? So card, let's say card, and we'll be finding out await db.query, and we're going to do the query. Then what we're going to do, we will say dot cards, right? So find first, and then inside here we are going to write a couple of more codes. As an example, where card equal to card.customer ID, then with you can say with what we are going to do with line items, right? So line items will be true, right? So potentially what it's going to give us, the card, right? Definitely we are going to get the card. So then what we need to do, it's a bunch of all the cards. Find card by product ID, it's going to give you the whole card by the customer ID, because we are just trying to find out the customer ID only. Then we need to compare that the card. If the card has the product ID exists, then return that particular card items, the line items, right? So let's try to do that. So in this case, let's say const line item, right? Line item, we can say the card line items to find by item, right? That item will be having the product ID, that product ID is matching with the product ID, then we can get the line items, right? So either it will give the line items, otherwise it will give the undefined, right? The line items, by checking the line items, if the line items exist, then definitely we can check it out, otherwise we can just throw the error. But we are not intended to throw the error, because you can see here in the card routes, right? So create card. Here, if we are going to find any kind of error here, let's say if error encountered here, throwing the error, then you will not be able to create the card, because the line items that doesn't exist at all, right? Then if you're throwing the error from here, then your pipeline will be going to break here, right? You cannot create the new items, because while you are going to add the new item, that does not exist at all in the database. So let's try to do that, not to throw any error. What we are going to do, return line items as the card line item, right? That is what we are going to do here. And finally, our card repository is complaining. Let's try to provide this find card by product ID. So now the complaint has gone. And if you can see here in the card service also happy, right? Cool. So now you can see the create card is done, right? So if it is exist, then definitely we are going to update the card. And if it is not, then we are going to create the card. All right, so now let's get back to routes again, right? So we have handled our create card functionality. All right, so let's try to close this function, collapse this function, right? And this one as well as. Now let's handle the get card functionality. All right. So in the later stage, what we are going to do, we're going to grab everything like from our user profile or some other way around. But right now, let's try to keep it simple, right? We don't want to extend this series much more because we need to cover the main business logic first, right? Then for the get card, also the similar way, what we can do, we need to grab our user, right? So this user, let's try to grab it quickly. So what you can do, maybe rather than typing all the stuff from beginning, let's grab it quickly from here. So it'll going to expedite the process a little bit. And let's try to add the cases. Try catch the error. All right, then let's try to move this piece of code inside the try catch. And here what we are doing right here, we are just grabbing the user and we're verifying if the user exists or not. The similar way, maybe what you can do, you can move this piece of code to a helper function and you can call right here wherever the authorization and authentication is going to be needed, that there we can find it out. So this check is it's not really necessary, because here in the request authorizer automatically going to send this if the user not authorized or user not assigned. But just for safer side, we're adding this one. Maybe later stage what we are going to do, while we're going to add some kind of wrapper for check this kind of authentication or authorization. Then we can simply remove this check from here. So our code will be more cleaner then. Now let's be that as it may. Now user is fine here. Then definitely what we can do, we can just get the get card, right? So here, instead of this customer ID from the request body, let's try to pass it from our user, right? User.id, right? Then this is fine. Now let's go to our get card. So this line is not required anymore. All right. So here in the get card, we need to do a little bit work. All right. So let's go to our get card functionality of the service, and here you can see we are simply returning the card data. So let's imagine one scenario. So while we are buying some product from any of the big e-commerce websites, all right, then while you have added the item to the cart and you kept it for, let's say, 2 or 3 days right there, right? Maybe let's assume like you have kept it for just 1 day, right? And next day you are visiting the same cart and you can see like some of the items it's showing like only 1 left or 2 left or only 10 left or something like that. Or maybe someone says like sold out. How this mechanism is working? This mechanism is working with the help of getCard, right? So because getCard is the one point of entry where front end is always to try to call that the getCard functionality while you are visiting your cart functionality, right? If you click on the view cart of any e-commerce website, then it is getting called the updated card information. And as you know, like in your card information that is residing, that is sitting inside your microservice. And your the order microservice is not aware about what is the current status of the stock, right? So that is what the puzzle we need to solve here, right? So let's try to do one by one. So first of all, what we are going to do, we will be calling this card data, all right? Then let's try to note it down. Get customer card data. Then what we are going to do, we are going to call, then find out or list out list items of the cart, items in the cart, and verify with inventory service if the product is still available, right? And finally return updated card data with stock, with latest stock. Right. So this is the way your customer will never ended up with like something ordered but stock is not available, right? That is never gonna happen, right? And some other complex scenario also I can explain, but I definitely it's going to be way complex, because with the help of microservice also we can keep updated this card data, right? So while any of the product has been it's been sold out, then it is going to fire some kind of event to our order service. Then whoever already added all this item to the cart, all the customer, then automatically those are the consumers, like our order service consumer are going to consume that event, and it will going to update all the data. So this is the other way also we can update, but we don't want to prefer that one, because again we need to wire it up with the Kafka or maybe a similar kind of events in order to update all the order data or maybe stock availability, right? So let's try to accomplish this way. Maybe in later stage I'm going to show you that one as well, as so you can have a kind of clear mechanism or clear understanding of how these big e-commerce systems are working in real life, right? So let's try to do one by one. So what we can do, let's try to move this piece of lines, this piece of codes in the top. Right now, instead of data, the data is too generic, right? So it's really generic. So what we can do, we can say cart, right? We can say cart, and we can say cart. Then we will be saying like cart not found, or cart doesn't exist. Actually, doesn't exist. We have our cart, right? So we found out our cart, right? If the cart doesn't exist, then it's gonna throw some error, and if it is exist, then definitely we can proceed further. So let's try to grab our line items, right? So const line items will be cart line items, right? So now can you see its line items is giving error, right? So we're going to deal with this error very shortly. So let's try to evaluate this error. If the line items, right? So if we can say line not line items dot you can say length, right? If there are no any length, right? If the count is 0, right? Then what we can say, the throw not pounder cart is empty, right? Cart items not found, let's say not found. Cool, perfect. So now you can see we have our line items, and we have added this check as well as. So if the cart line items length is not there, all right, or the cart line items is empty, right, then we can just throw this error, right? And you can see the line items, it's giving error. Why? Because while we are trying to find it out the cart, then it is returning simply cart. Can you see it's returning simply cart, and cart doesn't have the line items, right? So somehow we need to tell to our repository, hey repository, please, while you are returning the cart, make sure you are returning the cart line items as well as. So in order to do that, if you go to this cart, you can see in the schema, right? So inside the schema, this cart is import selected model from the cart. So it doesn't matter while you are returning the cart, if you're returning with the line items also, still this cart cannot have the line items. That is, you cannot use it here because our linter is complaining here, right? So to way to get it done, right? So what we need to do, let's try to go to DTO in the cart request. So here we're going to declare one model, all right? So one interface that is we are going to use in the cart repository. So that can grab the line items along with our cart, right? So let's try to do that. So what we can do, let's type first of all, let's use the card line items first, right? Card line items, right? So here what we are going to do, we're going to grab all this data, whatever the data it can be exist for our card line items, right? So let's try to add all those things. ID is going to be needed, and product ID is going to be needed, right? So, and the item name is going to be needed, price is going to be needed, variance, quantity and variance are going to be needed, right? So what are the other things going to be needed here? We can say like, created at, right? So this is going to be like date, and updated at, it's going to be date, right? So, and one more thing we can say availability. So why this availability is going to be needed, I'm going to tell you, but let's try to keep it like this way. Number, right? Cool. So we have our card line items, right? So as it's a kind of type, we are just like declaring just to use in our repository. Then next, what we are going to do, we'll be saying like export interface, right? This is going to be card with line items, right? So here inside this card with line items, what we can say ID will be needed, customer number will be needed, and line items will be our card line items. So this one, right? So now I think our purpose is ready, right? So let's go to again to the card repository, right? Instead of this card, what we can do, we can say card with line items, right? That is imported from our DTO, right? And similar applies to Pine card. Let's go to our below a little bit, where Pine card, right? So here we need to return this one as well as card line items, card with line items, right? So now can you see it's giving error, right? So it's throwing some kind of error because it says like it is not complying because whatever the data you are returning here, this is not complying at all. So let's try to fix that one. So all right, so here in the Pine card you can see we have changed this card with the line items, and now it is throwing the error. It is showing some kind of error. So what exactly it is saying? So if you go to return, then you can see maybe if you read the message, then you can see the types of the property variants are incompatible. Like it says the string is null, string or null. It's not assigned type of the string. So let's go here in the card request DTO, and you can see in the variant we have used the string, but we need to use null as well, right? So let's try to save. Now you can see card repository is perfectly complying. Like it is going to return the type of all this stuff that is we have added in our DTO, right? Now let's go to our card service, and you can see the error also it's gone, right? Now we can have a purely our card line items. So this line items can have the empty, it can have like empty array, or maybe it's a kind of array of card line items. Cool. So far our list out all the line items are perfectly fine. So let's try to verify our inventory service with the product, that product is still available or not. So this step we are going to handle right now. So here what we are going to do, first of all, let's go to our API broker, like where we have added this broker, right? So here you can see we have called the get product details. Maybe we need to introduce one more call to our product service, right? So catalog service. So where we can get the updated stock details. So let's try to add that functionality here. So here inside this get stock details, let's try to call our catalog service to get the updated stock details by providing our IDs. So it's going to be a post call, right? And you can see right now we're just like passing the data or all the IDs, right? That is we have received here as a kind of array where we're passing in the body. And in return, we are just simply responding the data, whatever the data we have received in the response. So in return, we are receiving the response, right? And we're converting all the response data to products array, right? The similar way we did just for one product. Here we're doing for a bunch of products. And if there are any error, we are saying like, products are getting, here we can say in different messages as like error on getting stock details. Cool. Now our get stock details are ready, right? Let's go to again to the card service. All right, so now our get stock detail API is ready. That is, we are going to call from our order microservice to our catalog microservice, right? So let's try to handle our stock details here. So I'm gonna say const stock details. Stock details will be await get stock details. That is, we have imported from our utility and broker. And if you go to up a little bit up here, you can see like this is the get stock details, right? Now what we can say, we need to pass something right here, right? All the IDs. So how we can pass it on? Let's try to iterate through all the line items. So we can say line items map.item.get item product ID. So this is how we're sending all the array of the numbers here, right? And finally, because right now we have the stock details, so let's try to calculate all the stock details. If any of the line item that doesn't match with the stock, then we need to send some kind of like, maybe we need to assign some value, right? So if you go to here in API, right? Not API exactly. If you go to request DTO, then you can see we have added one parameter, all right? One property here that is called availability. Availability is the thing where we are going to assign the stock details here, right? Let's go to here in the cart service here. Then again, let's try to check it out. If we have the array is array of the stock details is a kind of array, then because this stock details can return some kind of error as well as, right? So that's why we need to check it out, right? Then what we are going to do, update the stock availability in the cart line items. That is what we need to do. So line items, that's why actually you can see we have assigned these line items right here, right? And all the cart line items. That is, we need to tweak it here. And again, we need to update the availability value right here by looking at the stock. And you can see for each, definitely this is not going to be a big deal. We are not going to call 500 products in one time, right? Maybe one user can have how many? Maybe maximum 50. So for 50 items for this kind of nested loop, it's not going to cost at all, right? So let's try to use like this way, the line item for each line item, then stock where we're trying to find it out the stock, and stock ID is exactly the line item product ID, right? And because this stock exactly, it's a kind of product, right? So if you go see here in the product, then maybe here in the API, right? So in the API, you can see this is a product and product can have ID, right? And now if our stock ID is equal line items.product ID, then definitely we can say find it out, right? If somehow we able to find it out the stock, then we're assigning that line item availability is called the stock availability, the stock.stock, right? Or you can for the confusion, maybe you can just change it like, it's called like the stock item maybe, right? So you can say stock item and stock item. This stock will be inside the scope and this stock will be outside the scope, right? This is the pound stock, whatever, right? So now our line items availabilities are perfectly fine. So now our card, whatever the card we have, the card line items already we have assigned right here, right? So finally, what we need to do, like we found line items, everything we found here, all the line items are available and that line items are updated. Let's say here, we've just copied these things from here. It's not copied exactly. We are just assigning these items to here. And right now what we need to do, we need to replace all the line items, these updated line items with our card. So let's try to do that. So update card line items. So here you can say card, our line items will be line items, right? So here we are just like replacing the updated line items with the existing line items here, this one, right? And finally, we are returning the updated card with the stock availability. Perfect. So I hope so far this get card stuff is already clear, right? Now let's go to our edit card. So now our get card is done. Let's go ahead to the card routes. So now let's handle the edit and delete card. So to edit and delete card, we're going to use the similar kind of mechanism. Let's try to grab this piece of code from here, because anyway, we need the authorized user to perform the edit and delete card operation, right? So let's try to paste it here. And again, we are gonna handle the cuts. Then definitely we are going to throw the error to the next iteration. That is, we are going to handle in our Express app, right? So let's try to move this piece of code inside this the try block, right? So here, right after the user, right? And the similar going to applies for our here as well as, right? So let's try to grab this piece of code here and delete as well as the same, right? And here, then let's try to use the cats. Then again, error, we are going to use the next error. Let's try to move this piece of code to here right after authenticated user, like the user here. Now we have our authorized user here, but still anybody can edit the card, whoever having the proper authentication token, right? It doesn't matter that the card is it belongs to this user or not, right? Still they can edit the card. So how we can restrict that edit card functionality to the only this authorized user, whoever making this request, that user only authorized to edit card. So let's try to do that. So first of all, what we are gonna do, let's try to add one more parameter here inside the edit card. This is called customer ID. We're going to provide this user customer ID. But can you see it's complaining because this customer ID doesn't exist in the edit card. So let's go to our edit card. So here, in the similar way we did for our previous call, we are going to add one more parameter here. This is called customer ID as a number, right? So that means the input can have ID, quantity, and customer ID as well as, right? Now, similar is going to apply for our delete card as well. Let's just try to add one more thing here. Input, let's say input, and ID will be number, then one more parameter. This is going to be our customer ID, and this is going to be number as well as, right? And this ID is going to be input.id, right? And now again, let's go to our card routes, right? And here we can see in this problem is solved, right? So here somehow we're passing our authorized user, that the request user, we are passing it right here. So edit card can directly get the customer ID from there, right? So here on the service level, we're going to add some logic so it can handle the authorization section from there, right? And similar applies for the delete as well as. Let's try to pass this parameter here as well as. This is going to be customer ID will be our user.id, and our ID will be our line item ID. So why it is complaining? So it says like ID is number, customer ID is number, then line item is a string. All right, let's try to convert to number, right? Cool. All right, so now here it is done. Let's try to go ahead in the service and let's try to handle the logic one by one. So in the edit card, right now you can see what we need to do. First of all, we need to verify this right before update the card. Make sure that the card belongs to this current user, this customer. So in that case, let's try to introduce one more function. This is going to be const authorized user or authorized card, you can say, right? So in this case, what we're going to provide like ID, that whatever the item we are just to try to access, right? That the line item, let's say line item ID, and here we need to provide the customer ID as well as. ID will be number, right? And inside here we are going to write a couple of lines of code. First of all, let's try to get the card. Const card will be await repo.find card by customer ID, right? Customer ID, right? So and this is going to give us the card of the existing customer, this one, right? So now let's try to check it out. If the card doesn't exist, then card doesn't exist, we can say like this, right? So and if the card exists, right, then let's try to find out the line items, right? Because that card can have the line items, right? So card line items find the card item ID equal line item ID. That is the line item we're trying to edit, right? That is we are sending it here. And again, we will check like if the line item doesn't exist, then we can say here it's not found. It's not a not found error. So this is going to be new authorized error. Authorized error, right? So why this is authorized error, right? So you can say here you are not authorized to edit this card. So why it is authorized error? Because you can see we have the card item, right? The line item we just try to edit doesn't exist in our card. Then definitely that line item is not belongs to us, right? If it is can be possible, if it is can be exist, then definitely it will return the line items, right? It shouldn't supposed to return the undefined, right? So in this case, if it is undefined, then definitely it's a kind of unauthorized error. So that line item is not belongs to you, right? That is what we need to say. And if it is already there, then return the line items. That's all. Maybe in the further access, we can just like utilize these line items to do something, right? And now what we are gonna do, let's try to call these things here. Let's say await authorize card, simply like this, right? So if everything goes well, then definitely it will not throw any kind of error, right? Then it can be executed from here, right? And if it is going to give some kind of error, then it will going to throw some error from here, then it will not go beyond this, right? Then our card routes will going to throw this error to here, then we can easily get the error, like gonna say, hey, you are not authorized to perform this operation or something like that, right? So this is the way we can just edit this stuff to our here in the delete as well as. Perfect. So now we have covered all the endpoints, right? So all the endpoints of the card routes by adding the request authorizer, by accessing our authorized user, and everything is straight, right? So now what we need to do in the next episode, we are going to handle our catalog service, because as you can see, while we are creating the card, you can see, right? So creating the card is not going to be a problem, but getting the card, you can see we are getting the stock availability, right? Stock details. So if you go to stock details, you can see this product stock endpoint, it doesn't exist in catalog service. If you go to catalog service, go to source and go to API, right? Go to catalog routes, you can see we don't have that routes, right? And this is not a kind of matter of only route. We need to add some kind of logic as well as where we can get the list of all the IDs, right? So all the products, right? Here, whatever we are assigning the IDs, we need to find out all the IDs and make sure like it is returning correctly along with the stock. That is what we are going to cover. Then once that is covered, then we are going to give it a try with all the cards. Then we can fairly move forward to the order section. Then once we are going to work on the order, then we are going to hook up with our Kafka again with our catalog service and the order service. So then we'll be going to less work left for our order service. Only what we need to do, we need to integrate the payment integration, right? Just to make sure like once we have placed the order, then the order status has to update. And along with the catalog service, we need to notify accordingly, like once successfully order is delivered or order is confirmed, then we need to deduct the amount of the stock right here. So there are a lot of fun. It's going to be happen in upcoming couple of episodes. So we are quite closer to end of this series. Only just like few episodes are left where we are going to cover the Elasticsearch and the deployment section as well as. So yeah, sit tight and see you in another episode. Bye bye.